It began with what was meant to be a defining, almost cinematic moment that would reshape public perception entirely. A single tear reportedly slid down a perfectly composed face, captured in ultra-clear high definition as the world watched in near silence. For a brief instant, it seemed like a powerful display of royal compassion, echoing memories of Princess Diana's emotional public legacy. However, as cameras swept across the somber gathering at Bondi Beach, a location marked by the aftermath of a tragic attack months earlier, the atmosphere reportedly shifted. Instead of unity and shared grief, a wave of unease and skepticism began to build among observers. By the end of the 2026 Australia tour involving Harry and Meghan, that moment was no longer seen as symbolic empathy. Instead, critics described it as the start of a broader backlash that would eventually reach Buckingham Palace itself. What had been presented as a goodwill visit centered on healing and public service began to unravel into accusations of performance-driven publicity. Observers and commentators claimed the tour was less about duty and more about image management, suggesting it functioned as a carefully staged effort to maintain relevance in a rapidly changing public landscape. The visit to Bondi Beach in particular became the focal point of this criticism. To understand the intensity of the reaction, supporters and critics alike pointed to the sensitive history of the site. It was not merely a picturesque stop on a royal itinerary, but a place associated with recent trauma and national mourning. Critics argued that the decision to film and stage content there came across as tone-deaf, especially given the emotional weight tied to the location. Further controversy stemmed from claims that during the original tragedy, public statements and visible support from the Sussexes were limited or absent, while their later presence at the memorial was interpreted by some as opportunistic. These accusations fueled a growing divide between supporters who viewed the visit as compassionate and critics who saw it as performative. Commentators in Australia and abroad described the optics as deeply uncomfortable. Some argued that the emotional tone of the visit appeared rehearsed, while others pointed to what they believed were staged expressions and carefully controlled camera moments. This sparked a wider debate about authenticity in modern royal-adjacent public appearances. As criticism intensified, the Bondi Beach moment became symbolic of a larger narrative conflict. Whether modern public figures can genuinely separate personal branding from acts of public mourning. For many observers, the line between empathy and presentation appeared increasingly blurred. While the memorial visit was still being dissected online, attention quickly shifted to what was happening behind the scenes digitally. According to critics, a parallel commercial strategy was unfolding in real time, transforming the tour into something far more commercially oriented than initially presented. One of the most controversial points raised involved Meghan's outfit during the memorial visit. It was reported that shortly after appearing publicly in a designer dress and luxury footwear, those exact items were promoted through her associated lifestyle platform. This overlap between public mourning and commercial promotion triggered widespread debate. Critics argued that this created a troubling impression, that emotionally sensitive public events were being leveraged, directly or indirectly, for commercial gain. Supporters, however, maintained that fashion visibility and brand association are standard in modern media ecosystems and not inherently exploitative. Nevertheless, the timing of the product listings became a central point of controversy. Observers claimed that monetizing items worn during a memorial-related visit crossed an ethical boundary, turning a moment of public grief into a marketing opportunity. The controversy escalated further during additional stops on the tour, particularly at a children's hospital in Melbourne. The Sussexes had framed the visit as a tribute inspired by Princess Diana's historic engagement with similar institutions. However, critics argued that the execution felt fundamentally different. Where Diana was remembered for private, unfilmed interactions, the modern visit was described by detractors as highly structured and camera-oriented. Claims emerged that the environment felt staged, with participants positioned for optimal visual presentation. A widely circulated moment involving a young patient receiving flowers became central to the narrative. While many viewed it as heartfelt, critics argued that the broader context made it feel like part of a media production rather than an organic encounter. Tensions reportedly escalated within royal circles as footage circulated. Some insiders were said to be deeply unsettled by the portrayal, viewing it as an inappropriate blending of vulnerable medical environments and media content creation. Adding to the controversy were claims that the clothing worn during the hospital visit was also quickly linked to online retail platforms. This reinforced the perception among critics that every public moment was being integrated into a commercial ecosystem. As a result, the tour increasingly shifted in public perception, from a diplomatic goodwill effort to a highly monetized media campaign wrapped in royal symbolism. The commercial dimension of the tour became even more apparent with the introduction of high-priced public events branded as lifestyle experiences. One of the most discussed was a wellness-style retreat hosted in Sydney, promoted as an exclusive transformation event with premium-priced entry. Tickets reportedly reached into the thousands, positioning the event as a luxury experience rather than a traditional public appearance. However, when the event took place, critics claimed the reality did not match expectations. Reports described a venue still undergoing renovation with unfinished areas and a less than polished atmosphere. More significantly, attendance was said to be far below expectations, with large portions of the space reportedly unfilled. Observers interpreted this as a sign that the Sussex brand may not have the commercial pull it once appeared to hold. In contrast to earlier years, when global attention guaranteed high turnout, the response in Sydney suggested a cooling of public enthusiasm. Shortly afterward, further media ventures were announced, including a planned appearance on a major television cooking program. The decision to participate without traditional culinary credentials sparked backlash from industry professionals, some of whom questioned the appropriateness of celebrity participation in a competitive format. As criticism mounted, reports emerged of aggressive online promotion efforts, including coordinated positive engagement across social platforms. Skeptics allege that some of this engagement appeared inauthentic, fueling further debate about digital reputation management. The reaction in Australia became increasingly polarized. At a major sporting event in Sydney, public response to the couple's appearance was described as subdued and at times openly negative. Unlike earlier periods of intense enthusiasm, the reception appeared noticeably colder. Observers noted attempts by the couple to engage the crowd and create positive visual moments. But critics argued that the response reflected a broader shift in public sentiment. Instead of admiration, there appeared to be detachment and fatigue. This moment was widely interpreted as a symbolic turning point, marking a clear difference between past global fascination and current public skepticism. As the Australia tour concluded, broader questions emerged about financial sustainability, public perception, and the long-term viability of the Sussex brand. Critics argued that the combination of high-cost productions, underwhelming turnout, and ongoing controversy signaled a deeper structural issue. At the center of the debate was the contrast between private citizen status and continued association with royal identity. While the couple maintained that their activities were independently funded, critics pointed to the substantial security and logistical costs associated with their presence, suggesting an indirect burden on public resources. This fueled political and public frustration in Australia, where some citizens questioned why taxpayer-supported systems were being used for high-profile visits that were simultaneously commercially branded. Within royal commentary circles, discussions intensified about how the monarchy should respond. Some insiders reportedly advocated for stricter legal boundaries around the use of royal titles in commercial contexts, arguing that continued association risked reputational harm to the institution. Proposals surfaced suggesting tighter enforcement of branding rules and clearer separation between official royal identity and private enterprise. The underlying concern was that royal symbolism was being used in ways that blurred constitutional and commercial lines. Meanwhile, comparisons to Princess Diana continued to shape public debate. Critics argued that invoking Diana's legacy heightened expectations that were difficult to meet, particularly when modern media dynamics differ significantly from those of previous decades. Supporters of the Sussexes rejected these comparisons as unfair, arguing that public service evolves over time and that modern engagement inevitably involves media visibility and branding elements. Despite this, the perception gap continued to widen. To critics, the tour represented a misalignment between image and reality. To supporters, it remained a targeted media attack driven by selective framing. As the narrative reached its peak, the broader takeaway became less about individual moments and more about institutional tension in the digital age. Public figures, especially those with royal ties, now operate in an environment where every appearance is instantly monetized, analyzed, and contested. The Australia tour ultimately became a case study in that tension. Whether viewed as a failed branding exercise or an unfairly criticized public engagement, it marked a moment where perception hardened into division. In the end, the story was no longer just about a tour. It had become a reflection of how modern fame, legacy, and institution collide in an era where every gesture can be turned into content, and every silence can become its own statement.